Can you smell that? I think something's burning. Oh, it's you burning out again. In this video, I want to talk about how you, as a leader in a startup, in a tech organization, big tech, whatever, can stop from burning out. Because we see it happen all the time, especially for people who genuinely care. If you don't care, you're not going to burn out. We see it happen all the time to good people. And we sometimes have this wrong impression that just what is going to happen no matter what with time. I don't believe that. I think that we have control over our careers, how we develop, and you have the tools within reach to ensure that you don't burn out if you take the right steps. So in this video, we're going to go over 9 or 10 different ways that you can ensure you're avoiding burnout, reduce the risks of it happening, and having a good time. Because as much as the success in any specific moment is important, the real success is having the capacity to handle this marathon that is your life, that is your career. And if you're burnt out and you do these cycles, as I've seen people repeatedly do, where they shine so bright, but they get so close to the sun that they burn out, and then have 2 years where they are so lacking of energy. What's the point? We want something that's stabler. Yeah, you're gonna have some swings, but nothing insane. By the way, if you're new here, hi, I'm Ben-Yosef. I'm a tech executive, coach, and consultant, and I help people like you create organizations worth leading, because life is too short to lead mediocre teams. And if you care too much about your team not improving as much as you would like to, that can very easily escalate into burnout unless you're gonna follow what we're gonna cover right now. And I want to start with something that's very simple. Stop thinking about your work in terms of inputs. I see this repeatedly with co-founders and people who think like, I have to set some sort of an example, and they end up setting some sort of bar in their mind that's impossible to reach, because what they decide to do is work insane hours and always be responsive. And if someone's sending a Slack message at night, I have to reply, right? I'm the boss. I have to set the right example, show them that I'm always available. Or they feel really bad about taking some afternoons to be with their families, taking any vacation time, working insane hours. And let me tell you this, when you're working by inputs, no hour is genuinely important, because you're lowering the value of your time so much that you no longer really care whether you're at work and actively working and being efficient or not, because what's the alternative? Instead, start operating by looking at the outcomes. Set your day thinking, what do I want to achieve today? What would make today a good day? What would make today an amazing day? And aim to at least get that good day, knowing that if you reached, I don't know what hour you want or how many hours in the day, but once you reach those 1, 2, 3 basic goals you had to achieve today, you can call it a good day, because you did something good. It might not have been the best day, and yeah, maybe you could have done better. But again, this is about the marathon. And stop thinking about things as in, I have to sit there in this seat for so many hours because then something's gonna happen. If you strike the right balance, you're gonna get better. And also, when we care about our time enough, then is when we start finding improvements and really looking at the constraint of time in a way that makes us choose the right things to do. I've seen this repeatedly. I have a different video, which I might link to if I find it, where I tell about how I broke the pattern in a startup where we worked like 14 hours a day into something sane, and productivity did not take a hit. Productivity, in fact, actually improved, because then we actually cared about our time. It's not like, who cares? I'm gonna see her anyway. I'm gonna be here for the 14 hours no matter what. What does it matter if I'm gonna watch a YouTube video or I'm gonna play a bit too much with the console we have in the office or whatever? No, instead, I want the time I'm working to count. I want to get the outcomes. And if I get the outcomes, I'm good. And of course, you need to have outcomes that make sense. We used to have a joke that once you solve the bug in a day using git bisect, you can call it a day because you just did something amazing. You can go home. And if you don't know what's git bisect, I'm really recommending you check that out because it's rarely the right tool, but when it is, boy, is that fun. Now, connected to the outcomes, number 2 here is getting a life. Why do we need the outcomes? Because I don't want you to work so long. If you get a life, you're likely going to care about your time even more, which means you're going to be more efficient at work. Because again, if work is the only thing you're doing, you don't have anything that's also pushing you to become better. So how do you get a life? Easily start getting a hobby, something that makes you jazzed about, that's not just work. So get any hobby you'd like. I've got clothing, menswear, I like menswear, so I can geek into that. I can geek into wine. I can geek into coding. I'm learning Italian, so I can geek about that. I always have so many things I want to do, so no matter how much I enjoy my work, I also have a life. And that's of course putting aside my family. I want to be with my kids. My clients know that I routinely have time blocked out to be with my kids because there's only going to be so long that there are kids who want me around. Get a life. Get a hobby. Find things that you really like to do. Whatever it is, you can start with something small. Like you get too many fountain pens that are fancy and geek out about the differences between them, or fancy notebooks to go along. Whatever you want, but just get a life. Get some hobbies. Spend time with the people you care about the most because that time is precious. And when you realize that, that makes you value your work time so much more because you want that time to have a positive impact. And also, just getting a life means you're less likely to burn out because you have that thing going on. You have that safe area. And when I say hobbies, maybe you can go into, some sports, but I don't recommend the only thing having there is being some competitive sport because then you can burn out in both. I've seen that. So find the right balance for yourself. On we move to number 3, and that is innovate. Take risks. It's really easy to burn out when you're always in your safe zone, always doing what you know is going to work, even if it means you're going to work so hard to achieve it in the end. You need to have a sane amount of innovation, of taking risks, of experiments, so that you always spice things up, but also have the ability to have these leaps of progress over time, over your career. Don't just repeat the same year again and again and again, but do things differently. To do that, I recommend for tech organizations in general to look into intermissions. Other people call them sabbaticals, innovation weeks, whatever you want. In my book, I call them intermissions. That's the book over there, the orange one. And actually, if you look into the description of this video, you can find a link to get the sample chapter of the book, which is exactly about having more innovation and installing intermissions into your organization. And when you do that, you're going to see teams that are just having so much fun when they innovate regularly. We're not talking about a 2-day hackathon once a year. And the result of that is also reducing burnout, because when you innovate, when you take risks, either they succeed or not, but you're improving, you're growing, you feel alive, and you do things that actually break out of the mold. The burnout, a lot of the times, is because you feel you're in the same grind. And if you spice things up, if you try different things, that really helps avoid that burnout. And especially if some of these intermissions result in success and real breakthroughs, that means that things are going to constantly improve in general. So this is not just about taking care of your burnout, but also making the company better. It has a positive ROI regardless. So how can you say no to that? Another trick that so many people don't do enough, even though I bet you know you ought to, and I bet you think you do, is delegation. It's so easy to burn out when everything's piling on your plate because you care about the team, because you want to help people, because you look at them and you're like, yeah, they're already so busy, let me handle that. Or you can do it better. Whatever excuse you have to have this pile of stuff on your plate, knock it out. You cannot continue doing this and think that this is gonna be viable for too long. There are a bunch of different reasons for proper delegation, and I'm guessing there are like 5 million videos on this on YouTube, so I'm not gonna go into that. You know that delegation is critical, but let's talk about it, not thinking about what's good for your team, not thinking about what's a good manager. Let's be selfish. If you delegate well, you're not going to have so many things on your plate, meaning you're less likely to burn out, and whatever you do have remaining on your plate will have more of your attention. You're more likely to do that better. So allow yourself to be a bit more selfish. Yes, sometimes leaders are to be selfish in order to be successful and in order for their team to be healthy, and start delegating. Look at your task list for today, look at the meetings you've got this week, and try to choose a few that you can say, okay, I don't have to sit in this one, I can ask her to do this for me, I can delegate this to one of the managers, whatever. Choose a few things that's low risk and get the ball rolling. Even if you're delegating already, you're very likely missing out on opportunities to delegate even more. So why not try? Why not help you? So you reduce that feeling of being overwhelmed, having so many things to do, and enjoy the fact that you worked so hard to get these people in and let them help you. Give them some of the load. That's fine. That's not being a jerk. That's just how teams are supposed to operate. You have my permission. If anyone's complaining, send them this video, okay? And next, to avoid burnout over time is to deal with things. I see this constantly in my work when I help executives, that when you have a lot of issues that you just allow yourself to stick with and have them, weigh down on you, with time, they're gonna grow so much that you're gonna crack. Instead, what we want to do is to ensure that when there's an issue and it's a critical one, you face the truth. You handle the issue. So if someone's gotta get the feedback about underperforming, tell it to them instead of trying to hide it or not think about it for months on end, because every time something happens, you're going to remember, yeah, that's because of that manager or whatever, and you're going to keep on having this weigh you down. Similarly, when it comes to communication with your boss or with your co-founders or whoever it is, when there's something that's on your mind and it's really critical, don't try to, swallow everything and pretend everything's fine for months and months, because work is not about being a martyr. And disagree and commit means that first we're going to have the disagreement aired out. We have to talk about this, and then, only then, we can maybe commit. But first, have the ability to disagree openly with who matters. Deal with the things that are weighing down on you. Give the feedback that's got to be given. I've got a video about that. I'll probably link to it somewhere here on screen. And ensure that what you're doing is not just accumulating more and more of these things that are always in the back of your mind. Instead, air those out so you don't have to carry all of this, because I'm gonna guarantee all the pressure is gonna result in this pressure cooker that's really good in making you burn out. And relatedly, I really like doing this. I'm going to tell you to do the exact opposite, and that is to let go of things. You don't always have to battle. You can pick your battles. You can say, okay, this thing I don't agree with, or I think we can do it better, but I want you to consider, is it really that critical? And if it ain't, let go. You can't control everything. Not everything can be perfect. You can try to delegate it. You can try to talk about it. But if you feel like this is not going to be worth it, just let go. Again, to avoid burnout, we cannot have everything on us. We have to learn to either delegate it to others, face the truth, or just forget about it. That's fine. Again, that doesn't mean you're a bad leader, especially if you've gone through this short exercise of saying, is this important enough for me to speak up? Or if it's not, Does it really matter? And then you can choose to forget about it, knowing that it's going to be fine either way. This is not so critical, and you choose to let whoever's leading this take the charge there. That's fine. Again, that's not bad leadership. That's just being realistic. And I help my clients all the time realize that usually you want to choose one of these two edges. What's worse is staying in the middle, not essentially getting rid of anything, because you don't air it out, you don't forget about it, you just accumulate all of these things that's creating this drag on your life. Don't do that. Face the truth. Deal with it or forget about it. As we're getting close to the end, of course, another great way to ensure that you're not burning out is to get help. Don't go it alone. I have got a video filled with different ways to install your own support system and not going it alone, getting the help you need. And that's going to be certainly somewhere here on screen, but you need to do that. However, the easiest thing to do, I think, is to find a good coach. Yeah, you can reach out to me, but in general, I think that getting any sort of coaching help, no matter if it's short-term or long-term, can really help you if you're already feeling like you might be burning out, if you're feeling like you need some help, if you're feeling the overwhelm. Getting even short-term help can really help you get a sense of what's going on, ensure that you install some of the things we just talked about, so it's not yet another YouTube video you watch and continue to the next, but something you act on. That's what a good coach will help you do, and ensure that you're in this for the long term. So I'm not going to talk too much about it because you know what a coach does and you can tell that it can help you, but consider that. And if you don't have the budget for a coach, etc., that video I'll link to has a bunch of other options in the entire range of prices, including no price. So do check that out, because there's some support system available that's going to help you, and it's better than continuing to just do this by yourself entirely. The penultimate point is learning. And this is actually connected to innovation that we talked about earlier, but I think that it's critical for anyone to continue learning, continue getting information, going to conferences, going to meetups, reading things online, watching these videos like you're doing, or getting a really good newsletter. By the way, I've got one. Check the link in the description. But what you ought to do is not get into this stasis. When you stop learning, like not innovating, you become the thing that's just headed in the direction of burning out, because there's nothing new happening. So you're not going to have maybe stress-induced burnout, but you're going to have just boredom burnout. You're going to just at some point realize that you're just in some sort of a Groundhog Day. You're repeating the same things, and that's so hard to maintain enthusiasm and motivation over time, because if nothing's changing and you work in this, again, this is a marathon. So many startups I'm seeing realize that the time frames for success have gotten longer, because we're no longer talking about raising like 3 quick rounds in 2 years and selling. You have to create this viable business, which takes more time. And when that's the case, you have to stick for longer. And to do that successfully, you have to keep learning. So get some good books. It doesn't have to be about the work itself, but keep learning. Keep getting some interest into your life, so you're not the same person repeating the same day over and over again, but you're becoming better, even a tiny bit every day. I read something every day. And relatedly, and this brings me to the last point, I also invest in my own time every day. Every day I read and then I write, because that really helps me process. And again, this is the last point. Backed by so much research, what you want to do is write. It really helps you process. It helps you retrospect. Try to take the time to write and think about what you're going through, what's happening. When you verbalize things, it really helps you put a name on things. Give them the due space that they warrant. Have the ability to tackle things and notice these trends. I do this with my journals. You just saw the notebook earlier. I do this with online diaries. But it really depends on you. Some people do it with me as a coach. I'm their journal, but others also, I've seen so many starting to use tools, your LLM du jour, to just chat with that, tell it what you're thinking, and audio, talking to it, writing, whatever, and help that be your point of processing. Like, oh, that meeting was the worst, or I have this nagging feeling about project X. And when you start writing things, when you do this repeatedly, you start noticing, picking up on these patterns, and this connects to everything we just covered, because then you'll notice that there are issues that you have to face, and there are issues you have to forget about, and there's this thing that you keep getting back to, and maybe you can just delegate it. You'll notice all of these things when you take the time to retrospect, to think, to process. And it can be 2 minutes a day, really writing one list of bullet points about the brain dump of what's nagging you, and it can be something that you do, more time, like 20 minutes a week in one session. It really depends on what works for you. I'm not going to claim that there's one best way to do it. The most important thing is to do it at all. Once you start, so many of my clients were like, what, am I going to write a journal like, some adolescent? Yes and no. I think that just writing is really tremendous, and having the ability to formalize your thoughts and think what you want to do is probably going to help you become relevant longer when the AI comes to replace all of us. So I think that's a good thing to do in general. But again, the last thing you need to take away from this video is to sit and write things a bit, to process it. When you do that, you air it out. Research shows that this can really help avoid burnout. This can really help us make amends with ourselves and stop beating ourselves about things. And when you do this properly, you're going to see that with time you notice all these patterns and then can utilize the rest of the things we covered in this video. So you really ought to be doing that. That's it for this video. Thank you for sticking this long. I hope that at least one of these tips is something that you're going to try to implement immediately. And if you like this, I'm guessing one of my videos is going to be right here on screen that's right for you. But also, do check out my newsletter, because every week you can find there a video like this one, my podcast, an article, and some exclusive insights that I don't share anywhere else. And if you got anything out of this video, I'm sure the newsletter is going to be worthwhile for you. Thank you.